Hello, and thank you so much for joining our webinar today, Out of School Time Programs This Summer, Paving the Way for Children to Find Passion, Purpose, and Voice. I'm David Park from Learning Heroes, and now I'd like to introduce the moderator of today's conversation, Laura Johnson, Vice President Communications at the National Summer Learning Association. Laura?
Thank you, David. I want to say to all of you, you are the engine that makes all things go. So thank you. Thank you for this conversation. And thank you for all that you do as parents, as leaders, and as colleagues. I'm Laura Johnson, VP of Communications for the National Summer Learning Association. And on behalf of NSLA for short, and all of our out of school time champions, I just want to thank you for being here. Here at NSLA, we think about summer 365 days of the year. It is our singular focus and has been for more than 25 years. We are really focused on harnessing the power of summer so all young people can learn on their own terms, grow, and thrive. And we were really excited to hear our new Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, call to action all of our leaders to make summer and after school the best it's ever been for our young people. And that's certainly at the heart of everything that we've been doing collectively. But at the heart of all of this are families. And so we're going to dive right into the conversation. Learning Heroes has recently conducted surveys of parents, teachers, and out-of-school time providers understand the role these programs play in children's social, emotional, and academic development, compared with school and home. Families count on the out-of-home settings like summer and after school and youth development programs as places where children can explore their passion, their purpose, and their voice. And looking ahead to summer and the new school year, we're going to share some actionable insights from Learning Heroes' latest research findings, which is really like the building blocks of all of this, right? We're going to connect the dots between home, school, and out-of-school settings to understand strategies that support social, emotional, and academic skills across all three settings. And to get us started, we want to hear from you. If you haven't already introduced yourself, please put your name in the chat, but we want to ask you one quick reflection. If you could share a summer program, camp, or after-school program that really sparked your passion today, we would love for you to share that in the chat. Is there a program, camp, or after-school activity you went to as a child that helped drive your passion today? And I'm going to kick it off. When I saw this question, I immediately knew exactly what it was for me. And I loved twirling down to Leith Walk Elementary School in Baltimore City. It was a recreation center attached to the school. And there I loved my ballet classes with Miss Anna Apicella and carried that love straight through middle school, where I participated in the Baltimore School for the Arts Tweaks program and have loved dance and the arts ever since. So that was my spark. And I'm looking in the chat. I see a lot of different fun things, chamber music camp. Okay. Girl Scouts, built confidence, absolutely. Outward Bound, yep, getting out in the outdoors. Okay, these are great. Getting messy at art camp, absolutely. It's no fun if it's not messy, right? Middle school theater, thank you, thank you. Helped me climb out of my shell, yeah, for sure. And the, let's see, performing arts, all of those. That's wonderful, thank you for sharing. So this conversation is broken into kind of three chapters, and we are really excited about this journey that we're going to go on together over the next hour. We're going to start with some context setting, and I'm going to invite my wonderful esteemed colleagues to join me to the virtual stage. We have joining us Pam Loeb, who's the principal at Edge Research, and Wendy Lopez, who is Vice President of Content and Partnerships at Learning Heroes. Welcome, Pam and Wendy. Let's just dive right into what the research is telling us. Wendy, you're going to kick us off.
Yeah. Thank you, Laura, and to everyone who joined today. We're so excited to be at this point in sharing this research. It's really a part two. It's a build on our developing life skills research that we did in 2016 in conjunction with our partners at EDGE. And in developing life skills, we really looked at how parents think about, prioritize, name life skills, social emotional skills. And life skills was really how we saw that they talk about it. But in that study, it was mostly in the school context. And so through excellent pushes from thought leaders like Karen Pittman and of course our funders at Wallace, this is a part two and really looking at the critical role of out of school time. And so we wanted to get a holistic view, talking to and both quantitative and qualitative from parents, teachers, and out of school time providers. And Pam is going to take us through the methodology in a moment. But really quickly, just to highlight the purpose of the research, the first was to understand expectations. What role do parents, teachers, and out of school time providers see OST programs playing in the social, emotional, and academic development compared with school and home? What are the connections between these settings, and where are the opportunities? What should those connections look like? The second is defining success. How do parents define success and quality, and what does that look like? And I think especially, with all of the funding and all of the focus on, summer and out of school time and areas like tutoring, this is a really important area to look at, and the data is going to say a lot, as Pam is going to get into in a moment. And then finally, this moment in time, unpacking the COVID-19 impact. How do parents, teachers, and OST providers feel that the pandemic has impacted the role of OST now and going forward, right? So what are those silver lining, those opportunities? Again, our goal is really to share this in a way that is actionable and that is relevant to all of the great work that you all are doing day in and day out, and will be in the months and years ahead in this recovery phase. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Pam, who's going to take us through the methodology. And before that, I just really want to brag on Pam and her team. It's a privilege. Edge and Pam are really experts in this space. They've done a tremendous amount of research related to social emotional learning and specifically within the out of school time, not just this piece of this body of research, but in others. So Pam.
Thank you so much. And just as David said earlier, Stacia Tipton, who works with me, is available by chat if you all have questions. I'm going to start just briefly talking about the methodology. This was kind of a two-phase project. We started with an in-depth qualitative phase in November and December of last year. And this was a combination of focus groups, dyads, and in-depth interviews with K-8 parents, their children, teachers, and OST providers. And these were virtual sessions, given that it was the pandemic. But we were very intentional about recruiting a diverse group of people and in the OST provider space across diverse settings, and conducted these in both English and in Spanish. And all of that really fed into the development of our survey, which we conducted in February through March of this year. So kind of hot off the presses. We did a large scale 3,000 sample national survey. We talked to over 2,000 parents and guardians of children in kindergarten through 8th grade, public and public charter schools, and then also talked to 1,000 professionals, teachers, and OST providers of that same audience. As we go through the report, we've tried to color code things so it's a little bit easier to follow. So all of the data among parents, which is really kind of the bulk of the information we're going to share today, is in blue. Teachers are in yellow, and OST providers are in green. And there are frankly a lot more commonalities than differences across the data, but where there are statistically significant subgroup differences, numbers will be in blue if it's higher and red if it's lower.
Great. Thanks, Pam. So this next slide is our really high level insights and implications. So here we see 3 buckets of insights and implications from the research related to communications, policy, and programming. And Pam is going to dig into these further with data. But as we mentioned, we encourage you to chime in. So as she's sharing that data, chime in on insights, or we want to hear what you see. This is like hot off the press, and we're still sort of digesting it. So we're eager for the field and to help us identify what are those actionable opportunities. So the first that you see here is that this is what we really saw is that parents and teachers really see a very specific role for extended learning. What came through loud and clear from parents, teachers, and providers is that OST programs really provide a differentiated child-centered experience, whereas schools can be areas where you need to sort of fit in and are not necessarily unique to children. And home has its own culture, right? And it's a place where a combination of skills and attributes are developed. But extended learning programs uniquely bring out and support children's purpose, passion, and voice, hence the title of the research. And there's such power in that to unpack. The second is from a policy standpoint, especially in this moment in time, parents' responses suggest that participation in high quality OST is not equitably distributed. And there are significant differences between parent perceptions who have children in OST versus parents who don't have their children in these programs. So we think this is an important area to dig into and highlight, especially with both funds and hopefully new thinking and opportunities that come out of the American Rescue Plan. And then finally, how it all comes together, the programmatic piece. So, summer 2021, that is almost here upon us, offers a unique opportunity for parents, teachers, and OST, extended learning providers to partner, truly partner in supporting parents' top priority for their children, their social and emotional health. And we heard loud and clear from parents. I know I'm seeing this a bit with my kids, and it breaks my heart that parents know that and see that their children are regressing in several kinds of ways. And so how do we leverage this summer on that road to recovery and reconnecting? And then a through line in all of this is that districts will play a big role. And this is a moment in time. It's an opportunity to do better as a field at connecting dots and bridging towards the future with more comprehensive models that best leverage each of these environments, all 3, home, school, and out of school.
And just do a little bit of table setting on the research. So just to kind of provide context for the people who are watching, obviously this was a survey about out of school time, and we offered up a pretty broad definition to our respondents. We described out of school time, or OST, as programs that your child might participate in outside of school hours and or the regular classroom schedule. These are programs that have a learning or skills component with organized activities and learning opportunities, in addition to providing childcare, and may be offered before or after school or on weekends. And then of course, these days online or in person. 65% of parents say that they have a child in an OST program, and actually on average, 2 programs per child. And then when we kind of break it down and we have parents think about the primary program that their child attends, about half are interest-based, sports, arts, drama, music, and then the other half kind of a mix of academic, youth development, and opportunity-centered programs. And by that, I mean programs at museums, libraries, parks and rec, religious institutions. But I think what is really important to note, and Michelle alluded to this earlier, is that there does appear to be an opportunity gap. What you see here on the slide on the bar chart and on the pie chart are data from our OST parents, and then to the left and then kind of around the pie are comparisons to those who don't have a child enrolled in OST. And OST families report higher incomes. They also are more educated, and that is pretty consistent regardless of race or ethnicity. So definitely some differences between OST and non-OST families, which is important to note, and we'll dig into more in a moment. The other thing that we wanted to understand is, what do our audiences call this category? So Wendy was calling it extended, I believe, or extracurricular. I've been calling it OST. For parents as well as teachers, the most common term is extracurricular. 23% of parents, and particularly those who have their kid enrolled in interest-based program like sports or arts or a youth development program, as well as teachers, tend to call these programs extracurricular. OST providers and those who have their child enrolled in an academic program are more likely to refer to them as after-school programs. And those who are in opportunity-centered programs, recreation. But you can see that there's lots of other terms that small numbers of parents use, and the umbrella term that I'm using, out of school time, is actually only the term that about 5% of parents picked when they were asked to the descriptor that best described these programs. I want to pivot to the value proposition and what we learned from this research in terms of how to communicate the value of OST. And one of the things that we were able to do in the qualitative was these really great projective exercises where we were able to listen to parents, teachers, and OST providers talk about the value in their own words. And from those conversations, Learning Heroes created 18 different messages that talked about this value. And we asked our parents, how motivational is each of these as a reason to enroll your child in OST? What you see on the screen on the left are the top 5 messages among our parent population. And what is really interesting is, of the 18 messages, these 5 really focus not on the programs themselves, but on what they offer to the child. They're really kind of child-centered frames, what the child gains intrinsically from these programs. So number 1 is exposing children to new experiences, ideas, and perspectives beyond their everyday home and school lives. This was particularly resonant with low-income parents. Allowing children to find passion, purpose, and voice, also a top tier message, particularly for Hispanic parents. Other top messages were celebrating success in areas children love so they can gain confidence, and allowing children to express and be themselves, not just fit in. And then finally, allowing children to interact with other children of diverse races, ages, backgrounds, and cultures. And that was actually the top testing message for African American parents. We also got a lot of really good input on language. So one of the things, for instance, we saw as we looked at what messages resonated, language that is really aspirational, like find, explore, experience, dream, tests a lot better than language that is more academic and rational, like learn, catch up, and develop. And in fact, helping children catch up academically was amongst the lower testing messages of the 18 that we looked at. Related to this, we asked our parents how important a variety of different factors were in determining the quality of their child's primary after-school program. And they actually rated 35 different items. A lot of these were very important to them. So what we ended up doing is we kind of grouped them into categories, and then we did something called a driver or regression analysis to really understand how much each of these categories impacts perceptions of quality. Like, at the end of the day, what is the most important when parents think about picking a quality program? And there are 2 categories that kind of make up the majority of the pie here and the perceptions of quality. The first is what I would kind of call table stakes, and those are environmental factors. Is the program fun? Is it safe? Is it nurturing and welcoming? And then the other really important factors are related to what I just talked about on the last slide. These are kind of those child-centric factors. Number 1, does my child seem happy when they come home from the program? Are they gaining confidence, developing social and emotional skills, being exposed to new experiences, and pursuing their passions? So I've kind of talked about the two areas that are most important in impacting perceptions of quality. That's not to say that, knowledgeable and caring staff, academics, program communication, and logistics aren't important. They are, but they are not key drivers of perceptions of quality. And then a moment ago, Wendy talked about our life skills work that we did with Learning Heroes a few years ago. And one of the things that we learned from that study is that when you talk about social, emotional, and academic development, parents really understand the language of skills. In that study, we asked our parents, what are the most important skills and attributes that you want your child to develop? And through that, we were able to look at a lot of different frameworks and kind of come up with a list of 20, 22 skills that parents really honed in on. In this study, we took this just a step further, and we asked, which of the following are most important to develop at home, in school, and in OST? And what you can see here on this slide is that there's a lot of overlap and crossover across settings. But in this Venn diagram, what I really want to pay attention to is where OST differentiates. And that's around developing teamwork, confidence, leadership, particularly for parents of middle school children, as well as perseverance. And for Black and Hispanic parents, communication skills would also kind of go into this bucket. So that's the Venn diagram that was mentioned a moment ago, and I'll turn it over to Laura.
Thank you, Pam. Those were some juicy nuggets. I'm glad we had a chance to go back to them. So now we're going to go to our esteemed panel. I'm going to reintroduce them. We have LaVasia Bullard, who's the site director at Horizons Atlanta with Purpose-Built Schools and the instructional coach at Atlanta's Thomasville Heights Elementary School. We have Jamie Salatosi, who's creativity and innovation strategist of the National Inventors Hall of Fame and author of Wonder is My Compass. And we're going to have Pam and Wendy again to help really kind of thread this conversation. There's so many incredible things in that last segment, Pam, and so really interested in diving in. So Wendy, we're going to start with you. From a parent perspective, can you just unpack that Venn diagram that Pam presented just a bit?
Yeah, so to build on what Pam shared, I love this visual, right? It's the whole child in the places where they live, learn, and grow, right? Hopefully working in concert, and you see that overlap, and it's beautiful, and hopefully we can take that off the paper, right? And so from a parent perspective, I think what we see in this Venn diagram is how parents really value and recognize that OST is not just childcare, it's not just after school, it's really a complementary delivery system that reinforces key skills that are being taught at home, like self-esteem, but then also the ones that are uniquely supporting kids with what parents identify as top priority skills like teamwork, leadership, and confidence. And as Pam mentioned, those skills we really pulled from the Developing Life Skills, where we pulled the 60 most common traits and frameworks. And those skills like teamwork, leadership, and confidence rose to the top, were among them. And so that they are being supported in these extended learning programs really speaks to the value that parents see. I also think that we see that parents, we saw in Developing Life Skills, I should say, that parents at a high level and sort of inherently get what the brain science says, which is that they see their whole child, right? They know that if their child doesn't feel connected to what they're learning and to who they're learning with, they're not going to learn at their best capacity. And I think this Venn diagram speaks to that. And then finally, I'll just say that I think that by naming the skills like teamwork as primary to the value of extended learning or OST, that they are identifying a concrete way of how these different environments, homeschool, community, extended day, complement each other and can work to maximize each of these roles and environments.
I love what you said, Wendy, that parents, they see their whole child. And so being able to help others see their whole child in all of these different settings is so key. Pam, just going back to you, the research gauged teacher insights as well. So what are teachers' perspectives on OST and the must-haves? And can you tell us a little bit more about what they're saying about this space?
Yeah, sure. I guess it was kind of fascinating and not necessarily what we expected. One of the hypotheses going into this was that teachers kind of undervalue OST programs and providers. And we did not hear that in our qualitative, and in fact, quite the opposite. Teachers often talked about how they really valued the fact that these were places that kids could go and be themselves, and particularly for kids who might struggle in a classroom setting or learn differently. We were able to measure that in the survey in a few different ways. And one of the things that we saw is that teachers are much more likely to describe OST programs as must-haves versus nice-to-haves, providers as professional versus non-professional, and these programs as rooted in research versus just ad hoc. And that was to us is kind of Buck's conventional wisdom.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And just to move us along so we can get to the next chapter of this, I want to go to Jamie really quickly. Jamie, from your perspective as creativity and innovation strategist at National Inventors Hall of Fame, what are the benefits of children participating in OST programs and your program in particular?
Sure. Well, luckily, we're building off a huge body of research that shows the effectiveness of OST programs. But I think what's so powerful when you think about the research that shows 95% of science learning happens outside of a formal education classroom, you really start to think about the power of these out of school time programs. And by their very nature, more free choice learning types of programs, which OST tends to be, you're really tapping into children's intrinsic motivation and their interests, and just everything we see echoed in the research, those opportunities to build that confidence by experimenting in these safe environments where they can take some of those risks. We also see how they can develop skills in context. So I know for the National Inventors Hall of Fame education programs in particular, when a child wants to use their duck chucker to launch their rubber duck across the room, they really can't help but make some discoveries about trajectory and velocity and other physics concepts.
Did you say a duck chucker?
I sure did.
That's awesome. I need one of those.
Real example.
LaVasia, you sit in a really unique space between OST and K through 12 public education in your role. What do you see as unique about out of school time experiences and how they fuel a child's success in school?
Yes, I definitely have a unique opportunity because I get to see the same students during the school year and assist them academically. And then after school and during the summer, I get to lead them as in their after school and more extracurricular activity setting. And what I've seen is the students, school is school and it's at a certain pace and we have to get through standards and we have to cover certain material. But in the outside of school setting, we have more opportunity to spend time on the passions and introduce new opportunities to kids and new experiences, because we've seen kids say, I don't like that, and I don't want to swim, I don't want to do this. And we just simply ask, have you tried it? You should try everything one time. And so the data talks about the confidence, and at Horizons, we definitely have seen that by encouraging students to learn to swim. And a lot of them haven't had the opportunity to swim, but we teach them that through practice, through taking risk in a safe, supportive environment, you can succeed. And we have a motto saying, not yet. And what I've seen just having those kids come back in the school year, I've literally seen as soon as school comes, they kind of shut down immediately. And I'm like, hey, I saw you do this at Horizons. You jumped off the high diving board, or you got in that water. And then they instantly remind themselves that it is transferable. You can do something in an outside setting and you can bring it into school, and that work hard, keep trying, never give up mentality can be displayed in school. But it definitely takes a reminder to let them know that they can do it in multiple settings.
I love that, not yet. I just had an experience with my son who just could not hit the baseball, and he's been practicing, and all of a sudden he hit a double. So it was coming. Thank you for that, LaVesia. So in the chat box, you have a reflection question. What do great OST programs do to create space where children can find their own passion, purpose, and voice? So if you could share some ways that you've experienced and have seen this happen, we'd love to hear from you. We're gonna keep moving along because we've got a lot of chapters to cover, a couple more chapters to cover, and we're gonna shift to parent mindsets. And Pam, we're gonna have you come back and share some insights and reflections around that.
I'm going to spend the next couple of slides talking about kind of the COVID context and what it's meant in terms of what parents value right now in these settings, and thinking about summer and next year. So just as a reminder, we were having these qualitative conversations in the winter of last year. And as we talked to our different audiences about how things were going, typical words and phrases from parents and students were hard, messy, challenging. We had the opportunity to see students and parents in their home environment, and we kind of heard from parents, but we also observed children regressing academically, socially, and emotionally. And for teachers and providers, a lot of the terms that we heard were things like I'm exhausted, I'm frustrated, I'm being resilient though, and I'm really worried about chronic absenteeism, and because of it, learning loss, as well as the social and emotional health of my students. When we got to the survey, these qualitative findings really bore out. On the left-hand side, you can see the responses from parents when we asked them, what are you most worried about with your kid right now? And they were able to pick up to 3. And the number one is the fact that their kids are missing out on social connections and friendships, and then all of and how that kind of snowballs. And this was 14 points higher than being concerned about their kid falling behind academically. A third of parents are also worried about screen time, 2 in 10 about their child losing their motivation and interest in learning, and this was higher among Black parents. If you look to the right, you can see the top 3 things that teachers and OST providers are most worried about, and there's a lot of overlap with parents, but for teachers, falling behind academically is kind of their number one concern, and for OST providers, the emotional well-being of their students. The other thing that I think is really important to note from this data is that we saw real differences between OST parents and non-OST parents, and they just have a different perspective on how their children are doing academically. So parents who have a child enrolled in an OST program are more likely to say that their kids are getting A's, that their kids are above grade level in math and in reading, that they feel as if their child is prepared for the next school year, prepared for college, and that they just generally understand their child's academic performance more than parents of kids who are not in OST programs. So given some of the kind of disparities that I mentioned earlier, or some of the demographic differences between OST and non-OST folks, we really wanted to disaggregate the data and look at OST versus non-OST families on those academic dimensions that I just mentioned earlier, which are noted on the left-hand side of the screen. And then by different subgroups, compare OST families in blue to non-OST families in gray. And you can see here that, you know, on pretty much every different academic dimension and across pretty much every racial, ethnic, and income group, OST families are more likely to report that their children are succeeding academically versus non-OST parents. And this is either kind of directionally different or statistically significantly different. The one exception is low-income families. The delta between the two, there is a delta, but it is directional and not significant. And other data suggests that that might have something to do with access to quality programming. But the jury's kind of still out on that finding. So if we drill down on one of the data points that I just showed you a couple slides ago, and we ask our families how prepared they think their kids are for fall 2021. And I know that's on, you know, the minds of all of us who work in the education space right now. Again, OST families in gray are significantly more confident, in blue are significantly more confident than non-OST parents who are in gray. So 67% of OST parents say that they're extremely or very confident that their child is prepared versus just 47% of non-OST parents. And these distinctions get even greater when we look at families who believe that their child is in a high quality OST program that correlates with confidence significantly, as does dosage. So if your kid's attending a program 5 days or more a week, then you're even more confident that they're prepared for next fall. And this quote at the bottom of the page just, I think, articulates what we saw in our qualitative. As one teacher said, I've noticed the kids with who have out of school activities are the ones who get their work done because they figured out a strategy. And because they have something that they're successful at, their level of confidence as a person impacts how they approach learning in the classroom. And again, when we disaggregate the data, we see that OST parents, who are again the little blue dot, are more confident that their child is prepared for next year than non-OST parents, which are the gray dot, across various racial, ethnic, and income groups. But, you know, quick reality check as we think about fall 2021. We only have a quarter of parents overall who say that they're extremely confident, super gung-ho about their kid being prepared for fall. And when we compare this to the feedback from teachers, which is in yellow, we can see that there's real differences. So just 36% of teachers are confident, 36% are not. Everybody else is somewhere in the middle. So teachers not quite as optimistic as parents.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. So there's so much to cover and just not enough hours in the day. We're gonna go straight to our panel again, just to have some reflections on what you just shared. Wendy, just quickly, what's underneath the parent perception that their children are doing better when they're involved in OST versus those that are not?
Yeah. So I think first we need to acknowledge the inequities that were highlighted in the research in terms of relation to cost and quality of programs, as well as some of the other data points related to equity. I think overall, what we can pull away from what parents whose children are in these programs and them believing their child is doing better speaks to that they see that concrete value proposition, right? So for example, they see that confidence is being supported, which affects their ability to navigate and have the skills to get through challenging work. They also see the intrinsic value that they are providing in a child-centered way. So, for example, we've heard parents having issues with motivation this year, and we know that in order for children to stay motivated to learn, that learning needs to be relevant to them. And Jamie spoke to this. And that second, they need to feel confident that they can succeed. And I think looking at this data, I think we see that parents recognize that extended learning opportunities deliver on both of those things.
Thank you. Thank you, Wendy. Jamie, I'm going to turn to you quickly, and thank you for putting in the chat the Marshall James, The Power of Never Giving Up. So we'll definitely check that out. Thank you for that. Let's talk quickly about communications and how we intentionally connect the dots between out of school and in school, and effective strategies to understand how a child is doing across all of these different settings.
Yes, well, the research shows there's a lot of reverence in both directions on the relationship of formal and informal educators, and in school and out of school time. And so, I think that was a really key validating point for everyone who's joining us today. And so, that's a starting place. A great way to look at this is through the model of master creativity educator Paul Torrance kind of outlines the before, during, and after. How do we heighten anticipation before learning? How do we deepen expectations during the experience? And then how do we extend that learning afterwards? And I think communication and education can go hand in hand. So as we're thinking about how we're outreaching and the messaging that perhaps we're working on together and collaborating around, how do we make sure that we are maximizing all those phases of interaction?
That's great. I want to jump quickly to LaVesia and really talk about how OST in schools can be more intentional around connecting these dots. Because again, we're trying to look at the whole child. And so we need to have everyone talking, out of school time providers, the school districts, the families. How does that happen?
Yeah, that's a very important piece. And I would just say it starts with a question. Ask the child, what are they, if you're the teacher, ask the child, what are they doing this weekend or what they're involved in. If you are the out of school partner, ask them what they're learning in school. And so that would be the first place. And then the next thing would be to be intentional about asking what's happening so that you can show up. When you're the teacher and you show up to the sporting event, that means something to the child. So that's a way that you can build relationships. And the other side is, if you are the out of school partner, you don't have to come when the school day's over at 3. You can show up for lunch. You can show up to add tutoring or do something intentional in the classroom, because then you get to see the child and everyone in the environment where you aren't where they don't normally see you. And one quick tip is, if you're asking someone to come and you want them to show up, you can say, can I count on you being there? It's really hard for people to turn that down when you say that, or I would love to see you. Can I count on you showing up this time or the next time?
Can I count on you showing up? I love that. Thank you. We're going to shift because I cannot believe we're almost out of time. And we're going to move to the third chapter and talk about the opportunities of this unique moment. And everyone is trying to make sense of this moment. So I'm going to kick it over to Pam to talk us through this summer 2021.
Awesome, thank you. So the last chapter is around summer 2021, and the first thing that we asked our survey respondents was, when you think about this summer, what is the most important thing for your children, your students, to do during this time? And you can see that participants said things like learn and read and develop skills and practice their math problems. But what really stands out is that kids need to have fun. They need to be a kid. They need to hang out with their friends. They need to socialize. They need to stay connected. And that was, we really heard that loud and clear in these open-ended responses. And then when we asked a follow-up question and we said, what's your priority for children this summer? For parents and for teachers, number one was addressing the social, emotional, and mental health needs of students. And that was 18 points higher for parents than academic support for learning loss, 15 points higher for teachers. Kind of number two, physical activity, 3, passion and purpose, and 4, kids getting out and having fun. This relates to kind of back to my Venn diagram for a moment. A follow-up question was, when you think about the summer, which skills or attributes do you think parents, teachers, and out of school time leaders need to partner on to help students develop? And here are, again, the top 5 skills, and these were consistent across parent demographics and consistent across professional settings. Number 1, social skills. 2, teamwork. 3, confidence and self-motivation and problem solving. And what you might notice from these is that they are very similar to some of those distinct skills that live in that OST bucket in that Venn diagram that I showed earlier. And then a follow-up was, how can we support you? How can we support parents this summer as they think about their kids' social, emotional, and academic development? Parents generally said that they're going to look to their schools and districts for support and information. But right after that, and frankly, just as or kind of more important to parents of color and some lower income parents, are large OST providers like the Y and Boys and Girls Club. And right behind that was National 4-H Council. We also have a lot of parents who don't pick any of the resources that we tested in the survey. We had about 10 others, or just weren't sure where to go for help. So lots of opportunity. And last but not least, as parents think about what's next for their child and their summer plans, we have about a quarter who say that they're going to send their kid to a specialty camp and or a recreational summer camp activity. About 2 in 10, some type of learning or enrichment activity. Another 2 in 10, play group or pods. That's more popular, not surprisingly, for elementary school parents. And then just about 14% are thinking about tutoring for their child, either alone or in a group. The other thing I will say is that, OST families are firmer in what their plans are. Almost a third of non-OST families just don't know what's in store for their child this summer. So again, lots of opportunity. And as we saw earlier, districts and large providers can really play a critical role in ensuring that kids have equitable access to quality programming this summer. So that's the end of the data, and I will turn it back over to my colleagues.
Thank you, Pam. Really insightful. Wendy, just wanted to tap a little bit into summer right here and right now, and what Learning Heroes is planning to support families and the out of school time community.
Yeah. So we leaned in heavily, not just to this data, but what we've been hearing. We've been in the field in one way or another since schools closed last spring. And we know that parents and teachers and kids are exhausted. We all need a moment to recharge. We know, as Pam said, that parents care about academics, but first and foremost, they care about their kids getting back to being kids, socially connected with peers and family, and also second, as we saw, getting kids off screens, right? That concern is front and center. So what we try to do is really reimagine our summer campaign, take a step back and really focus on that aspirational, more intrinsic language. And with this as a backdrop, we created what we're calling Summer Recharge. It is meant to engage parents through the lens of the whole child. And also connecting the dots, not just between this summer, but the fall and the road ahead. This is not going to be solved in one summer, right? And it's a moment to reimagine that continuity. And so what we see here is it's 3 simple calls to actions and messages. The first one is really towards the end, now that the school is coming to a close, to connect with teachers, to ask about what those key skills are that we can focus on during the summer. The second is all about reconnecting with what matters, leaning into your child's interests and seeing what makes them light up with confidence. And then finally, again, trying to create a consistent year-long feedback loop, giving parents the tools and space and the encouragement to jot down what they notice, what they've been noticing over the past year and what they notice over the summer, and sharing that with tutors, with summer program leaders, with new teachers in the fall. And so we have a whole suite of tools that include a parent-teacher planning tool, one that is sort of begins with the parent prompting with key questions and places for them to jot down notes. We also have a teacher version that can support teachers in hopefully, you know, whether they're having that end of year conference or not, it can be an informal touch point at the end of the year. So stay tuned. This will launch at the top of May. As always, it'll be in English and Spanish, and you know, it'll have a multimedia approach with print and digital and social media as well.
That's wonderful. I love recharge. That is such an appropriate positioning and message for this moment. LaVesia, I just want to talk about communication for a minute and how we ensure two-way communication and equitable access to high quality summer programming for kids, especially this summer. And we talked a lot about messaging. We talked about things that are important to parents. How do we blend this all together and really have this two-way street for communication?
Well, I really did like that teacher communication and parent tool. So that was something that definitely could be utilized. But one thing that we've started and planning and have started and plan to do are what we call fireside chats. And we're the point is the data is there. So I love the data that was shared. It tells us what parents are looking for, but that's a general overview. And that's a great place if you have no data and you can't talk to parents. But what we found is that our parents don't always know the lingo of what social emotional learning is. And we could have an idea and we're teaching one thing and they're like, you're not doing what we wanted. And so we've had to scale it back and say, what's the best way to contact parents? We've given surveys in the past, they've worked. Zoom has worked for a while, but people are zoomed out. And so we've had to say this one family, like really get granular. One family may like text. One family needs a phone call. 3 families need to only talk to the staff member that they have a great relationship with, because if someone else calls them, they're not going to pick up or they're not going to be available. And so I just think that it's about being creative and it's not doing the same exact thing and expecting a different result. And just because parents don't fill out a Google survey that we use in the workplace that works for half of us, doesn't mean that the parents aren't invested and that they don't want more for their kids and they don't know what they want. So it's up to the providers to figure out a different way that works best for all of the parents, not just the ones who respond best to email or respond the best way that you like to communicate.
Mm-hmm. So important. Jamie, I'm going to combine a couple of questions into one for you. What tools and resources, strategies that we saw emerge in the pandemic might we apply to post-pandemic and future learning when it comes to engaging families and also speaking to the individual needs of every child this summer? With fun, of course, at the center.
Absolutely. And LaVesia, thank you for tipping us off perfectly about this topic of personalization, because when we design from the core for a variety of entry points and access ways, when we create from that space, then we are not trying to retrofit something. And so being inclusive from the start is absolutely key. And our program this summer for Camp Invention and the National Inventors Hall of Fame is called Recharge. And every child is getting one of these microphones that has Dr. Jim West's voice saying, I invented the Electret microphone in this device, and I can't wait to hear your ideas. So it's looking at how are we combining and personalizing these experiences. And so we are offering both self-led through activity books as well as hybrid experiences where the kids are online, but then they're going off and they're able to get some outside time, as well as, of course, classic in-person fun. And so really, I encourage everyone to look at how can we meet people where they're at and then figure out where we want to go together.
I love that. I love that mic. I need one of those in my life. LaVesia, just really quickly, what do we as a field need to do to make sure parents' voices are heard? And this is so important, especially in this moment. We've spent so much time with our children. And what would you say that we need to do to make sure that their voices are heard throughout this?
I just would continue to reiterate what everyone said. Like, it starts from a conversation, but it's not just about one way that you call someone or you reach out to them when you need something. It has to be that you are regularly in contact, sharing the great things that you've seen, because as out of school providers, we get to see their kids in a light that they don't often see. And we know that schools communicate in a certain way, and so about certain topics, and some are excelling and some are struggling in school. And so just adding little nuggets for parents is very helpful. And I would just say being open to this new space that COVID has provided a space for us to be flexible, to do the unthinkable, and to continue to do that after we get back to the quote normal. I think that that's going to be important, to not go back to the old normal, but to create something new and to continue to be innovative in all of the things that we do.
Thank you, LaVesia. I'm going to hold on to that. Do the unthinkable, and kick it over to David to close us out. Thank you all, Jamie, Wendy, Pam. This is really a fantastic conversation.
Thanks, Laura, and thanks to everybody for this great conversation. It's been a really quick hour. Just wanted to remind everyone, we will be sending out this recording as well as a blog and information about other webinars, including a webinar that we're having on May 13th from 2 o'clock to 2:45, Make Summer Count, How to Keep Your Child Learning While Having Fun. So thank you so much for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.